My dad slammed his hand on the dining table so hard that the forks jumped. You chose yourself. He spat, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. You let your sister suffer just so you could feel proud of yourself. The turkey sat untouched in the center, a ridiculous monument to a family pretending we were still whole. My mother clutched her napkin like it could hold the tension together. My aunt looked away, like she hadn't been the one whispering last week that I was too independent for my own good. My uncle just cleared his throat and stared into his wine. I stayed seated. Calm. My fingers curled loosely around my glass of water, not wine. Because unlike them, I still needed clarity. Yes, I said, my voice low but steady. Finally. That was it. The moment the last string snapped. Hi. I'm the one who said no. The one who walked away. The one who didn't give up her savings or her sanity just because it was Christmas and my sister overdosed, again. They call me selfish. Cold. Unforgiving. My dad points at me like I'm the villain because I didn't show up with a checkbook and a prayer when my sister crashed her car into a mailbox 2 weeks ago, high, uninsured, and still wearing the ankle monitor from last time. But let me ask you something. What would you do if your whole life you were raised to believe that love equals sacrifice, but only yours? Because growing up, I learned that I was the fixer. When Sarah got suspended, I had to miss my debate meet to pick her up. When she totaled her first car, my college fund disappeared into the repair bill. When she got pregnant at 19 and ran off, I was the one driving my mom to prenatal appointments, not Sarah. And when she got arrested last month for aggravated assault, they didn't even ask her boyfriend to step up. They called me. My father didn't just want my help. He expected my sacrifice. So when I said no, when I finally chose myself, it wasn't a betrayal. It was self-preservation. It was 15 years of swallowed hurt and forced smiles hardening into a boundary no one else had the courage to draw. So here we were. Christmas Eve. A room full of people who'd rather sit in silence than question the system that broke me. And for the first time, I didn't flinch when he pointed at me. Because yes, I chose myself. And thank God I did. Because no one else ever had. There's a certain silence that falls after you say something your family never thought you'd have the nerve to say. After that night, after I said, finally, nobody called for 3 weeks. Not Mom. Not Dad. Not even Sarah. It was like I'd vanished from their version of reality, like I'd broken some unspoken contract. The good child agreement. Be quiet. Be helpful. Be available. And above all, never say no. I didn't grow up thinking my family was toxic. It wasn't that kind of obvious dysfunction. No screaming matches. No broken dishes. Just slow erosion. Subtle favoritism. Emotional manipulation cloaked as tradition. My sister, Sarah, was always fragile. Sensitive. The creative one. She had a string of diagnoses and rehab stints that they talked about in hushed, hopeful tones, like it was all just part of her journey. And me? I was reliable. Which, in our house, meant I didn't need anything. Didn't ask for anything. Didn't cause trouble. Didn't cry. The first time I gave up something big for Sarah, I was 14. I'd been accepted into an out-of-state summer writing program, full scholarship. I was so excited I printed the acceptance letter and taped it to the fridge. 2 days later, Sarah got caught shoplifting makeup and cigarettes. My parents decided we couldn't afford to have me away right now. That she needed her big sister. I remember standing in the kitchen while my mom peeled the letter off the fridge. She didn't even look at me. Just said, "We'll apply again next year." But we never did. It became a pattern. I gave up senior prom to babysit Sarah's kid. I took night classes so I could help pay bills when Sarah totaled her second car. When she started dating guys who hit her, it was me she'd call crying at 2 a.m. And when she always went back to them, it was me left sitting with the guilt and the bruises I couldn't stop. I told myself it was love. That's what love looked like, right? Showing up, again and again, even when it hurt. But the truth is, they were never going to stop asking. Because I'd never taught them I could say no. By the time I was in my late 20s, I had a decent job, a small apartment, a used car, and a bank account with maybe 5 figures total in it. That was my whole empire. Not much, but it was mine. Until the night Sarah got arrested again. This time, it wasn't just DUI. She had gotten into a fight with her boyfriend, drunk, high, whatever, and pushed him down the stairs. He broke his arm. Her neighbors called the cops. It was domestic violence with a history of prior offenses. She was looking at real jail time. And right on cue, my parents called a family meeting. Translation: I was summoned to sit in their living room while they explained how I was going to fix everything. "We've talked to a lawyer," Dad said. "It's not cheap, but if we act fast, you could cover the retainer," Mom added, sipping her tea like she hadn't just offered up my savings. "I can't," I said. They both blinked. Then Dad laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Of course you can. You just don't want to." And he was right. I didn't want to. Not again. Not this time. Not when Sarah was 31 and still living like rules didn't apply to her. "I've been putting money away for a down payment," I said. "For a place of my own. I can't drain that now." Silence. Then Mom, soft and bitter. "You always did care more about money than family." That one hit like a sucker punch. I opened my mouth, then shut it. What was I supposed to say? That all the times I bailed Sarah out, no one ever paid me back? That every dollar I saved felt like a tiny slice of freedom? That maybe, just maybe, I didn't want to work until I was 70 just to keep someone else afloat? "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "But I can't help this time." Dad stood up. "Then you're no better than the rest of the world. Ready to throw family away when it's inconvenient." After that, the Cold War began. They didn't yell. They didn't argue. They just withdrew. Mom stopped calling. Dad unfriended me on Facebook. Sarah sent me one long, rambling voice memo calling me a traitor and a selfish bitch, then blocked me. For the first time in my life, I felt completely outside the circle. I wish I could say it felt liberating. It didn't. It felt like mourning. Like the death of a version of me I didn't even realize I'd been clinging to. For weeks, I moved through life like a ghost. Work, home, grocery store. I didn't go to my parents' house for Sunday dinner. I skipped Sarah's court hearing. When Mom texted me an old photo of us at the beach when we were kids, I didn't respond. I couldn't. It felt like a trap, like a soft rope meant to tug me back into the same loop. And then Christmas came. I almost didn't go. But guilt is a powerful force. So I brought a bottle of wine and a polite smile and tried to tell myself I could survive one dinner. It took all of 20 minutes for the cracks to show. Sarah was there, of course, new boyfriend in tow, this one with a neck tattoo and dead eyes. She acted like nothing had happened. Mom greeted me like I was a guest. Dad barely looked at me. And then, just as we were about to eat, Sarah launched into a speech about how some people think they're better than the rest of us. And not everyone has the luxury of walking away. I let it go. Until Dad pointed at me and said the thing that finally broke it. "You chose yourself." And yeah, I did. Because someone had to. The night ended with me walking out before dessert. I left the pie I brought on the counter. Got in my car. Drove home. Sat in the dark. And cried. Not because I regretted it. But because I knew what I'd lost. Or maybe what I'd never really had. Family, when it costs you your peace, isn't family. It's bondage. And for the first time, I was cutting the cord. After I walked out of that Christmas dinner, I promised myself two things. 1. I would never again apologize for protecting my peace. 2. I would not let guilt make my choices for me. The next morning, I started untangling myself from them. It began with a quiet purge, nothing dramatic. Just small, final acts. I called my bank and closed the joint savings account that still had my name linked to Mom's. Just in case. I emailed our old family lawyer and requested full documentation on the inheritance I had received from Grandma, something Sarah had always assumed we would split, even though the will was clear. I went through every shared financial obligation I had and untied every knot I could. I was done being their safety net. For weeks, no one reached out. It was like I didn't exist. And strangely, that silence was more freeing than painful. It gave me space to think, to breathe, to grieve. Then, around mid-January, the call came. It was from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. But some part of me, morbid curiosity, maybe, picked up. "Is this Allison Green?" "Yes." "This is Donna McCarty, from First Gate and Levinson." Your parents are attempting to contest the asset transfer of the Willow Street property. Are you aware? I nearly laughed. The Willow Street property was a small rental home my grandmother had owned. In her will, she left it to me exclusively, something my parents had always been quietly bitter about. 3 years ago, I'd finally put it in my name, cleaned it up, and started renting it out for passive income. They were contesting that? I met with my lawyer that afternoon. She wasn't surprised. They likely believe you're still emotionally entangled. Most people back down when it comes to family. I smiled bitterly. Then they don't know me anymore. The next few weeks turned into a chess match. My parents claimed the property had been promised to the family as a collective asset. They cited old emails, family conversations, and vague implications from a Thanksgiving dinner in 2016. It was laughable. But they weren't stupid, they were strategic. They knew how to weaponize guilt. They filed public claims that, while thin, were enough to delay my refinancing process. They sent character affidavits to the court painting me as unstable, selfish, emotionally manipulative. It was surreal, reading statements from my own father describing me as aggressive and ungrateful, when all I'd done was walk away. I didn't crumble. Instead, I built my defense. Carefully. Quietly. I compiled every document related to the inheritance. I retrieved voicemails from my grandmother. I found notarized copies of the property deed, the transfer record, emails between my lawyer and my parents at the time, all clearly stating their agreement and acknowledgement. But the real turning point came when I found the email. It was an old one, sent from my mom's address 2 years ago. She'd written, "We understand and agree that the house should stay in your name, since Grandma made that clear. We don't want any confusion in the future." That sentence was gold. When our court date arrived, I didn't tell anyone. I showed up in a gray suit. Calm. Focused. And when my name was called, I stood up tall and met their eyes across the courtroom. Mom looked away first. Sarah didn't show up. Dad tried to stare me down, but there was no anger in him anymore. Just something else. Regret, maybe? Or disbelief that I'd finally stopped being afraid of him. The judge didn't need long. The evidence was clear. He ruled in my favor within the hour. And just like that, it was over. Except it wasn't. Because Sarah got arrested again. This time, it was shoplifting and resisting arrest. Her mugshot made the local news, eyes smeared with mascara, chin lifted like defiance could save her. The comments were brutal. And then someone recognized our last name and linked it to the lawsuit. That's when the real storm began. A local podcast picked it up. Then Reddit. Then a viral TikTok about the selfish older sister who sued her parents. Of course, they had it all wrong. But that's how the internet works. I didn't panic. I leaned in. I reached out to a journalist I trusted, a woman I'd met years ago at a nonprofit fundraiser. I told her everything. Not the rage, not the scandal, but the truth. About growing up as the strong one. About the cost of being needed. About what it means to set a boundary in a family that's built on guilt. She titled the piece, "When Loving Your Family Means Leaving Them." It went viral for a different reason. People saw themselves in it. Thousands of messages poured in, strangers saying thank you, people who'd been painted as villains for protecting themselves. For the first time, I wasn't alone in my story. And then the email came. From Sarah. Subject line: "You think you're better now?" She called me a narcissist. Accused me of exploiting her addiction for attention. Said I was capitalizing on her pain. It was venom, top to bottom. But she ended it with, "You'll come running back when this blows over. You always do." That was the moment I knew she didn't know me anymore. Because this time, I didn't reply. Instead, I started something new. I took the attention from the article and turned it into a platform, small at first. A blog. A resource list for adult children navigating toxic family dynamics. Then a newsletter. Then virtual support circles. Within 3 months, I had thousands of subscribers. By summer, I was hosting workshops. By fall, I had a book deal. I wasn't just surviving my family. I was building something from the wreckage. People asked if I felt guilty. No. I felt responsible. For myself, for my healing, for the truth. Not for their reaction to it. One afternoon in October, my dad called. First time in 10 months. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't say much. Just, "You've made your point. Call your mother." I deleted it. Because it was never about making a point. It was about finally living a life that wasn't managed by obligation. I never expected them to understand. I just needed them to stop controlling my choices. And they had. Because I'd taken that power back. One quiet decision at a time. One boundary at a time. The first time I truly felt free was on a Wednesday morning. I was sitting in a quiet coffee shop, laptop open, finalizing the edits on the introduction to my book. Outside, fall leaves skated across the pavement. Inside, the barista played an old jazz record, and the smell of cinnamon and espresso hung in the air like a warm hug. My inbox chimed with a new message, the publisher's green light for the launch date. A small thing, maybe? But to me, it was everything. I wasn't successful in spite of what happened. I was successful because I refused to stay buried in it. The book wasn't about vengeance. It was about clarity. I didn't name names. I didn't retell every wound. Instead, I wrote for people like me, the strong ones, who were always told they could take it. The ones who never asked for help. The ones who finally broke and walked away. And people listened. The community I built grew. Not fast, but solid. Organic. Real. Survivors of narcissistic families. Caregivers who were never cared for. Firstborns who were more therapist than child. We found each other, not to share pain, but to build new blueprints. In that space, I saw versions of myself at every stage, the helper, the doubter, the furious, the grieving. And slowly, I came to understand something I'd never had words for before. My family never failed to love me. They failed to see me. And I kept trying to earn a love that required me to disappear. But I was done disappearing. Life became simpler, lighter. I moved out of my tiny apartment and bought a small craftsman house in a quiet neighborhood, paid for, in part, by an advance from my book. I painted the walls soft green. Planted lavender by the front step. Adopted a rescue dog named Milo who snored louder than my old coffee machine. I created new rituals. Morning walks without checking my phone. Sunday afternoons with friends who didn't demand explanations. Thanksgiving spent in a cabin in the woods, where nobody cried over cranberry sauce or weaponized childhood memories. There were still moments, of course. Shadows. My father's voicemail never got a reply, but he called again a few months later. Then again. Always short. Always stern. He never apologized. But he did leave one message that stopped me. "Your mother had a stroke. She's home now." No request. No demand. Just that. I didn't go. Not then. Instead, I sent flowers. A handwritten note. I told myself it was enough. And maybe it was. Maybe that's all there was left to give. Months passed. Sarah resurfaced on social media, posting cryptic quotes about betrayal and fake family. She tagged me in none of them. I didn't respond. What was there to say? She made her choice. I made mine. But peace isn't the absence of pain. It's the decision not to let pain rule your life. The day of my book launch, I hosted a reading at a small independent bookstore. The room was packed, standing room only. People laughed. Some cried. I read aloud the last line of the final chapter. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop proving you're good, and simply start being free. Afterward, an older woman came up to me. She gripped my hands tightly and said, "Thank you for showing that walking away isn't failure. It's survival." I went home that night and sat on my porch in the cold. Wrapped in a blanket, Milo curled at my feet. I looked up at the stars and let myself cry, not because I was sad, but because I had finally built a life that didn't require me to suffer in order to belong. And that life didn't come from revenge. It came from the quiet, stubborn act of choosing myself every single day. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name in careful cursive. Inside was a photograph, faded, folded in half. It was from that beach trip years ago, me and Sarah building a crooked sandcastle, both of us sunburnt and smiling. On the back, one line in my mother's handwriting. "I always hoped you'd find your own castle." I stared at it for a long time. Then I framed it. Not as a tribute to what we had, but as proof that I left, and still built something beautiful. Because in the end, I didn't need their apology. I didn't need their approval. I just needed the permission I'd been withholding from myself. to live, to breathe, to exist outside their version of me. And that, finally, is what I did. If there's one thing I've learned from walking away from my family, it's this: choosing yourself will never feel clean. It will not feel like triumph. It will not feel like the movies. It will feel like betrayal, because for so long, you were taught that loving them meant losing you. They never said it outright. Families like mine rarely do. But there was always an invisible ledger being updated. Every time I said yes, I was good. Every time I hesitated, I was difficult. And the moment I said no, I was selfish. But selfish is just what people call you when your boundaries inconvenience them. It took me almost 30 years to understand that I wasn't born to be a buffer. I wasn't put here to carry the emotional debt of my family. I wasn't created to absorb blame so others didn't have to grow. And when I stopped doing those things, the silence that followed wasn't a punishment, it was clarity. The truth is, walking away isn't about anger. It's about grief. You grieve the parents you wished you had. The sister you hoped would heal. The version of yourself who thought that if you just tried harder, things would finally change. But change doesn't come from effort alone. It comes from recognition. From saying, this dynamic is broken, and no amount of my suffering will fix it. So you start over. Not by forgetting, but by choosing different. You learn that peace isn't something you find. It's something you build. You learn that love without respect is just obligation wearing a kind face. You learn that silence can be sacred, and that some calls never need to be returned. You learn how to speak to yourself gently, because for too long, your inner voice only echoed what they told you. You're too much. You're too cold. You never do enough. And now, you get to replace that soundtrack. You learn that healing isn't a single moment. It's hundreds of tiny ones. Like making coffee without flinching at a calendar reminder. Like laughing and realizing no one's watching to weaponize your joy. Like saying no, and feeling no need to explain why. And perhaps most importantly, you learn that your story is not shameful. That the world is full of people just like you, silent warriors who finally said, enough, and walked through the fire alone. When they call you selfish, smile. Because selfish people don't lose sleep over others. But you did. For years. You lost time. Energy. Dreams. You gave them everything. And when you finally kept something for yourself, they called it cruelty. But now you know better. Self-respect isn't cruelty. Boundaries aren't betrayal. And healing isn't revenge. It's reclamation. So to anyone reading this who's been called the black sheep, the cold one, the one who changed, let me say it clearly. You didn't change. You remembered who you were before they told you who to be. And that's not selfish. That's freedom.